So on my bookcase in my lounge, hidden away behind the swans and the decks and the birthday cards, there is a blue beaded flower. This flower holds a story, a quite incredible story. So this little bead flower is one of the most precious things I own, and I got it in the Ukraine, and it's in my tarot room at the minute because I want to light candles around it, not have it far away from me at the moment because of the terrible things that are happening in the Ukraine at the moment. I thought I would tell you about how it came into my possession some 11 years ago now, and in telling that story I wanted to tell you all about the spirit of the Ukrainian people. So I placed my beaded flower on my tarot table where I could see it, a yellow crystal for the Ukrainian flag, a black stone for the Morrigan, a war goddess after all, a crystal wolf howling on a silver icy stone, part of this story, wolves on icy fields. I lit a candle specially designed for protection for the families in the Ukraine fleeing, the men left behind, and the soldiers fighting. A crystal heart surrounded by protection, representing an institution in the middle of nowhere that has my heart. How to tell this story in the midst of what's going on. The Hierophant, the teacher. Well, when Tilly was 1.5, she was diagnosed with a really, really rare syndrome, and I realised that all the challenges I'd got, it was not a phase, it was not going anywhere, the sleepless nights, the challenges, and the level of grief that comes in on a newly diagnosed mother is immense, and I crumbled under it. And in that crumbling and crawling into a dark cave, I looked out into the darkness for teachers to show me the way forward, to light a light, to bring in some hope somewhere. And I found a world of bloggers, of families with special needs blogging their story, and a lot of them had adopted special needs children, and that led me into the world of an American charity called Reese's Rainbow, supporting adoptions from overseas and their stories, and the stories of the moms choosing to bring special needs into their lives just gave me hope. It gave me reassurance that this could be done, that it would be okay, I would find a way. And it helped me to step out of a very dark cave. And once I'd stepped out, I began to look at the children left in institutions in countries like the Ukraine that simply don't have the medical or financial infrastructure to support the families, the moms and the children with these sort of high demanding diagnoses, and my heart broke. I found teachers who opened up the horizon for me, and it was a horizon full of forgotten children. The 10 of Sparks. So the details that had opened up to me about all of these children did push me into action. I couldn't get them off my mind. In another time and place, that would have been me and Tilly. Things were challenging for me here, but to compare to the stories that had opened up before me, it was not comparable whatsoever, and I was pushed to action. I just wanted to do something. I couldn't adopt from overseas within the UK, that was closed to me. I tried to adopt another special needs child within the UK, that was closed to me too for a number of reasons. So I did the next best thing, and I got involved in fundraising for Reese's Rainbow, and I took on initially one child who just struck at my heartstrings, who was in a baby house in Odessa in the Ukraine. When her family stepped up to adopt her, I then swapped to another child called Bobby. Now, Bobby's profile literally pulled my heart out. It simply said underneath a very sad photograph, "I am in a remote institution. I have no hope without you." And those words, "no hope without you," just would not leave me day and night. And the "you" became me. I thought, who else is doing anything? If not me, then who else? There was nobody queuing up to help him, and I made a vow there and then to help this little boy. So I started fundraising for Bobby. Pushed into action. The Two of Spirals. The Two of Spirals. A balancing act and a coming together. So Francine's family were on the way, and they had their final court date, and the timing could not have been worse, because the final court date in Odessa to go and get the first little girl I'd fundraised for landed at a time when the father was out on a call of duty in Afghanistan. So Laura reached out to me and was telling me this, and I just decided there and then to get on a plane and go and help out in the courts in Odessa. I'd never met Laura, she'd never met me. We were either side of an ocean. She was in America, I'm in England, and we'd only talked on the phone, and I had no money, and I just decided to just get on a plane and go. But while I was out there, I thought, what a perfect opportunity to see if I could find this remote institution where Bobby was. It was Orphanage 50 on Reese's Rainbow. There were no other details, but I found one photograph of another child in a newspaper article that I knew was at the same institution, and through that newspaper article I tracked down a charity called the Happy Child Fund, whose director was called Albert Pavlov, and I reached out to the charity to see if they knew where this institution was and if they could get me in. And it was a connection that was just magical. It was incredible. We arranged dates for me to try and get out there to find this institution and possibly find Bobby. The aim was to update photographs of the children, to update details, and to give them a better chance of being adopted out. So I had one phone number for Albert, I had a contact with Laura in Odessa, and I had my camera, and I got on a plane to the Ukraine. Arriving in Odessa and meeting Laura was just incredible, and started a lifelong friendship as we started a week of court visits to finalise the adoption process for Laura to take Francine home and to get her out of the baby orphanage, which was in Odessa. It was quite a week with some sightseeing thrown in the beautiful Odessa, and it ended with hours and hours in court and a victory for the adoption process. King of Coral. This for me just screams of Albert and the work he does out there, and the amazing work of so many Ukrainian people. When I first got involved with Reese's Rainbow, I very wrongly thought how cruel the Ukrainian people must be to abandon their children with special needs or medical conditions, and to abandon them over to institutions and just to not be bothered. None of that could be further from the truth. When I got out there, I witnessed broken parents with no other option. There was no money, there was no support. We visited hospitals and delivered medical equipment that the Happy Child Fund had fundraised. So I stood in hospitals with no equipment. I watched Albert be surrounded by worried parents whose children couldn't get medical care because they knew Albert was this doorway to hope. Everywhere I watched Albert go, he was always in the corner talking to the people who were battling with no resources, no money, no support. With a regime as well, where if people in power kicked up too much of a stink, they would be easily replaced by other people desperate for a job. It was a no-win situation in every area. In amongst this walked Albert and his team at the Happy Child Foundation, who were trying to do the impossible, to find ways to support these parents, to get resources in, to give hope to the forgotten. Think of Cups people who were battling in impossible situations, which is why I think we're seeing the tenacity that we are seeing now in news stories of a spirit in a people that just are used to battling through the impossible. I cannot speak highly enough of the people that I met in the Ukraine and just their bloody mindedness to just keep going regardless. The Ace of Sparks, just what can you imagine? Look at these wild horses. This for me sums up the capacity for the Ukrainian people to dream. I saw it in Albert. Albert's vision was happy homes for all these forgotten, disabled Ukrainian children. Not necessarily to adopt these children away from the Ukraine, but to give them a loving environment similar to home within the Ukraine. And he'd started doing it. He'd built the first of the happy homes out there, out at the institution, the remote institution where I was going. His vision was to build more happy homes, which I got involved with the fundraising for, and wild horses couldn't stop them. And this just sums up the Ukrainian ability to dream. The Six of Coral. And the Six of Coral, the giving of gifts. This takes me back to the room where I was given the wire flowers. Kalinovka. I am in a remote institution. The post had said Bobby's Institution, Orphanage 50, and it was remote, the sort of remote that you just can't get your head around until you're there. Now, I grew up in the Welsh borders, miles from the nearest house, miles from shops and buses and trains. I thought I knew what remote was. I didn't. 16 hours by train, 2 hours by car, nothing but tiny villages dotted on the way, tiny little bubbles of connection on the edges of potholed roads, flanked by huge snow drifts. The institution was at the end of this bone-shattering car ride and train journey, and when I got there, it stared glumly back at me, its billowing black smoke against the stark backdrop of snow. It seemed so joyless. This was Kalinovka, and I'd arrived. The institution layout wasn't clear, sprawling across old farmland, crumbling buildings alongside housing for the residents, buildings separated by icy fields with creeping wolves that came out at night on the ice, a cold labyrinth that had me facing the wrong direction at every turn. One of these buildings was the older man's house. I entered this house with trepidation and immediately found myself in a large and cold entrance hall. A young man to the left in a battered old armchair grinned at me. There were shoes lined up at the door, which made my eyes fill with tears. Their regimented placing reminded me of the babies I'd seen in the Odessa orphanage that I'd visited first before getting on the train. The babies at this orphanage also obedient and careful to follow the rules. These babies folding their clothes just so hanging their coats just so, placing their socks just so. These shoes belonged to those babies grown up. The shoe placing spoke of a lifetime of institutionalised living. The corridors in this house were long and cold, with residents sitting alone, rocking. But there was one room that I was taken to with much excitement, a small room, brighter and more colourful, in stark contrast to the empty corridors. An art room where residents made beaded artwork, felt work, pictures, art saves. I knew this, but here in this little room, never before had it been so obvious. Work in progress scattered around, beautiful work, intricate and detailed, demanding love and care and patience to produce, and just screaming at the world of what the residents here at Kalinovka were capable of if just supported and given the opportunity. So I left as much money as I could for bags of beads and wire, but I wanted to do so much more. And the residents in return, with nothing to offer, was just so generous still. This is the Ukrainian spirit. They insisted I choose one of the beaded flowers as a thank you. That's what my beaded flower is. It came from this shelf and it is one of my most treasured possessions. And all the time as I wandered the hallway, one young man was never far away, respectfully keeping his distance, helpful, catching my eye on repeat to smile. This young man was Yura. I loved Yura. He got braver and braver as we walked around, and soon he was walking next to me. He was so keen to take me to meet his friends. He beckoned me to a room, but Albert warned me not to go too far in. Yura continued to beckon me in to meet his friends, and he was told off for it. And so, with heartbreaking embarrassment on his face, he instead went in to get his best friend and to bring them out to me. The two walked back to me. "Please take our picture," he asked. Best friends growing up together here, smiling for a photo from a stranger in a world where their fate was stamped and sealed and closed forever because of lack. And yet there was an art room, there were smiling carers. We began to give the toys out that I'd brought with me in a big bag. I was so surprised because I'd envisaged these toys being given to the little kids, not to the older men in this building. But the excitement was incredible as young men, young adults held fluffy bunnies and were joyous. We found another room with a table tennis game in progress. The young man, who was very good, stopped playing and led me to look at a poster high up on the wall. He was so pleased to show me. The young men then grinned at me, the friends together staring into my camera lens. They seemed so full of untapped potential and dreams, so much personality. Was this to be Bobby's future? At this point, I still hadn't even found Bobby. But I thought back to his sad face. Would he too be sitting in that back room, staring at an unexpected visitor from a corner, wanting a toy, grabbing a bunny? Or would he become one of the men in the background of the pictures, defeat taking them? Would he give up? Would he sit facing the wall? Would his shoes be neatly placed by a door that led to nowhere? The life of these young men broke me, for they are truly the forgotten ones, too old for adoption hope. And although the caregivers here are wonderful, full of Ukrainian spirit, they were already giving so much. The ratio here was 1 caregiver to 25 men. How on earth were these people doing this and still dreaming? That's where my gift came from. That is where I saw hope and patience and hard work and determination and kindness in what would could be perceived as a cruel environment, but these people were amazing, and through it all walked Albert, gathering information, trying to find the next way to help, dreaming big. While we were there, we walked around the grounds and he excitedly found a new building that he thought could build his second happy home there. He'd already built one, and it was so exciting to walk in it and to go around and see the lives of 7 boys taken out of the institution, living a more normal life. This next happy home dream would be for 6 girls. The ability to keep dreaming when you're blinkered at every turn with nothing to support you, the ability to keep giving in hostile environments, the ability to keep loving through it all is what I saw when I went to the Ukraine. The trial of wings. Just step through that small portal and meet the psychopomps who will ferry your journeys back and forth between the worlds. Don't be afraid, you travel every night. This is the way of things, and the raven has your back. In the air you will be led to calm the frenzied mind, or to the brilliant argument, or the question, who is being dreamed? This takes me to the house where a portal opened, and I stepped forward to find the person of who was being dreamed, Bobby, the day I found Bobby. It was the day I was heading home. I'd spent 2 days searching the institution for Bobby, and I had almost given up. We had about an hour before we were due to leave, and I went into the last building, one last hope. That was all I had, and it was held within this stark building in front of me. One last door to enter, one last staircase to climb. Where was Bobby? I climbed that staircase inside to find a single child at the top, rocking, holding onto the carpet as if to stop himself floating away. His moaning cut into me as an empty swing opposite mocked his lone figure with colourful whispers of the childhood fun that he might have had. We turned left and we walked to a room crammed with children. 2 caregivers amongst them stopped as everybody looked up. One child immediately threw himself onto the floor, obviously fearful, his tears appearing like waves. Others became excited, jumping up or rocking quicker. I scanned their beautiful faces, still no Bobby, and my heart sank. And then a small, quiet child, lying face down on the floor near me, slowly turned, pulling himself to kneeling, and my heart literally tumbled. It was Bobby. I had found him. I had actually found him. After all those desperate rooms, after all those longing faces where children were tied in cots, bodies knotted with sleeves knotted together to stop them from self-harming, children that just left because there was not enough resources to care for them in this impossible place, children dying. I'd found him. After all those desperate rooms, here at last were those deep brown eyes like pools. I'd found the child I'd been searching for. Bobby dragged himself away into a hallway. He couldn't walk, and I became swamped by the other more boisterous children, each and every one of them deserving of cuddles, toys, gifts, each of them wanting my hand, my lap, my time, my love, each one stealing my heart. It was intense. Finally, I extracted myself and went out into the corridor after Bobby. And I did something I'd been waiting to do since the very first time I'd seen his picture. I knelt down, I wrapped my arms around him, I pulled him into my lap and I hugged him. "I'm looking for your mama, sweet boy," I whispered in a language he couldn't understand. I'm looking hard, so hold on, won't you? I won't give up, so don't you? I whispered. I wanted to stay and take him out into the fresh air, to let him breathe fresh air and have some fun, but I'd literally found him at the point of my own departure. So the portal had opened and I'd stepped through, and I had found Bobby. I updated pictures, I got new records, and sure enough, after about 6 months, somebody found a video that I'd made and stepped forward to adopt Bobby, who's now in a home in America. I see the Empress, I see the mothers, that we've seen them on the news trying to get out with their kids, but I've also seen the mothers of the forgotten children as well. It is a country stretching one flower to make an entire garden, and that's why it's so heartbreaking to see what they are facing at the moment. They are resourceful. If anybody needs a break, it's the Ukrainian people. This card with all the flowers on, the flamboyance, reminds me of time spent in Odessa, where people seemed larger than life. It was -30 when I was in Odessa. It was so cold. As we walked along the coast that now the Russian army is trying to block off from the country. We walked along there in biting wind, we walked down steps, we played on the streets, we watched weddings going on in -30. We saw dogs dressed up in tutus. It was a happy, eccentric, cold place that is in my heart, and the thought of troops marching in and that place being under fire is so heartbreaking, and my heart is with everybody there because they are a vibrant people with a heart for resourcefulness. This card says her heart is a conference of 1,000 wild roses, and that for me is a very fitting statement for the people of the Ukraine. The underlying energy of this reading is the 7 of Sparks. Ready, go. And I think the words in the book for this card sum it all up. Mighty energies taking shape. None of the chains will work, nor will Rapunzel's tower. They cannot keep her back. She is highly practiced and musters up her bravest revels till her flame is strong enough that none can put her out. This is the Ukraine I know and love.